Hello students, today we will study lesson 8 of history, civilizing the native, educating the nation. We studied in the previous chapters how the British rule affected the Rajas, Nawabs, peasants, tribals, weavers and the iron smelters. In this chapter we will study and understand what implication it had on the lives of the students. When the British gained political power in India, their first aim was territorial conquest and control over Indian revenue. As they established themselves, they felt that they had to change the culture and traditions followed by the Indians. They also felt that they had a cultural mission to civilize the natives, change their customs and values. They felt the Indians had to be civilized and educated so that they would be better. Initially, the officials of the East India Company did little to promote education in India, but under pressure from the British Parliament and educated Indians, they were forced to undertake measures towards improvement of the Indian educational system. Several Christian missionaries were sent to India for the spread of education and conversion of Indians to Christianity. But before that, we need to study about the education system in the pre-British India. Before the British rule, education was imparted through a chain of elementary schools, the Pathshalas, Maktabs and Madrasas for higher education. Pathshalas were places where a guru used to teach a group of students various subjects orally. And Maktabs, or the Persian schools, which were attended by both Hindus and Muslims. Common subjects of study at the Maktabs were grammar, poetry, logic, law and philosophy, astronomy also. And madrasas, these were a place of learning. It's an Arabic word for a place of learning, any type of school or college. The education provided in such institutions were based on old texts like Vedas and their commentaries, especially in the Pathshalas. Such education was not considered to be up to date because Vedas, the basis of such education, did not keep pace with the modern world. And then in 1830s, William Adam, a Scottish missionary, he had been asked by the company to report on the progress of education in vernacular schools. So vernacular means language spoken by ordinary people in a particular country or region, the local language spoken in a place. So when Adam toured the districts of Bengal and Bihar, he found that both elementary and higher education systems existed in India. Children were given both private education at home and public education at the Pathshalas. He found that there were over 1 lakh Pathshalas in Bengal and Bihar itself. There were small institutions with no more than 20 students each. So these Pathshalas were very small institutions. It had only 20 students each. But the total number of children being taught in these Pathshalas was considerable, over 20 lakh. So these Pathshalas were set up by wealthy people or the local community. Some Pathshalas were started by a teacher or a guru. The system of education was very flexible. There was no fixed fee, no printed books, no separate school building, no benches or chairs, no blackboards, no system of separate classes, no roll call registers, no annual examinations and no regular timetable. In some places, classes were held under a banyan tree, in other places in the corner of a village, shop or a temple or at the guru's place. Fee dependent on the income of the parents. The rich had to pay more than the poor. Teaching was oral and the guru decided what to teach in accordance with the needs of the students. Students were not separated out into different classes. All of them sat together in one place, and the guru interacted separately with groups of children with different levels of learning. Adam also discovered that this flexible system was suited to the local needs. For instance, classes were not held during the harvest time when rural children often worked in the fields. The Pathshala started once again when the crop had been cut and stored, and this meant that even children of peasant families could study. Up to the mid 18th century, the company was concerned primarily with higher education. So it allowed the local Pathshalas to run without much interference. But after 1854, the company decided to improve the system of vernacular education. It felt that this could be done by introducing order within the system, imposing routines, establishing rules, and ensuring regular inspections. So for this, they appointed a number of government pandits, each in charge of looking after 4 or 5 schools. The task of the pandit was to visit the Pathshala and try and improve the standard of teaching. Each guru was asked to submit periodic reports and take classes according to a regular timetable. Teaching was now to be based on textbooks, and learning was to be tested through a system of annual examinations. So everything changed. They introduced their system of education in India. Students were asked to pay a regular fee, attend regular classes, sit on fixed seats, and obey the new rules of discipline. It was almost like what we are following in our schools these days. And the Pathshalas, which accepted the new rules, were supported through government grants, meaning they used to get money to run the Pathshala. And those who were unwilling to work within the new system received no government support. Over time, gurus who wanted to retain their independence found it difficult to compete with the government-aided and regulated Pathshalas. And the new rules and routines had another consequence as well. In the earlier system, children from poor peasant families had been able to go to Pathshala since the timetable was very flexible. Because during the harvest season or the sowing season, the children used to work with their parents in the field. So during those times, these Pathshalas did not run. And the discipline of the new system demanded regular attendance. Even during harvest time, when children of poor families had to work in the fields, inability to attend school came to be seen as indiscipline, as evidence of the lack of desire to learn. And slowly, most of the children stopped going to these Pathshalas. And as we see that due to colonization of India, education system suffered because the company had stopped giving institutions grants. Earlier, these institutions used to get grants from the Indian rulers or the local zamindars, the learned people who supported these Pathshalas. And then in 1783, a person named William Jones, he arrived in Calcutta. He had an appointment as a junior judge at the Supreme Court that the company had set up. And in addition to being an expert in law, Jones was a linguist. Linguist is someone who knows and studies several languages. He had studied Greek in London and Latin at Oxford, knew French and English, and had picked up Arabic from a friend. And he had also learned Persian. And in Calcutta, he began spending many hours with pandits who taught him Sanskrit language, grammar, and poetry. Soon he was studying ancient Indian texts on law, philosophy, religion, politics, morality, arithmetic, medicine, and the other sciences. And Jones also discovered that his interests were shared by many British officials living in Calcutta at the time, Englishmen like Henry Thomas Colebrook and Nathaniel Halhed. They were also busy discovering the ancient Indian heritage, mastering Indian languages, and translating Sanskrit and Persian works into English. Together with them, Jones set up the Asiatic Society in Bengal and started a journal called the Asiatic researchers. Please underline these in your book. Jones and Colebrook came to represent a particular attitude towards Indian. They shared a deep respect for ancient culture, both of India and the West. And in order to understand India, they felt that it was necessary to discover the sacred and legal texts that were produced in the ancient period, for only those texts could reveal the real ideas and laws of the Hindus and Muslims, and only a new study of these texts could form the basis of future development in India. So what they felt, that if you study about the lost heritage of India and understand the lost glories of India, this process would in this process they would become the guardians of Indian culture as well as its masters. So they wanted to help Indians to rediscover their lost glory. And these people were known as orientalists, who had sound knowledge of the language and culture of Asia. They favored the development of Sanskrit and Persian languages in India, and also wanted the medium of instruction to be in these languages. But by 1830s, the attack on the Orientalists became sharper. Thomas Babington Macaulay was one of the most outspoken and influential of such critics. He saw India as an uncivilized country and needed to be civilized. Then James Mill was one of those who attacked the Orientalists. He declared the British effort should not be to teach what the natives wanted or what they respected in order to please them and win a place in their hearts. The aim of education ought to be to teach what was useful and practical. So Indians should be made familiar with the scientific and technical advances that the West had made, rather than with poetry and sacred literature of the Orient. So this was the thinking of the Anglicists. These people were known as the Anglicists. And they supported English as well as scientific knowledge, and they emphasized upon English language to be the medium of instruction, whereas the Orientalists, they wanted the local language to be the medium of instruction. The Anglicists regarded the knowledge of East as unscientific. And they believed that no branch of Eastern knowledge could be compared to what England had produced. These were the two people, James Stuart Mill and Thomas Macaulay, who were totally against Indian culture. So please read the chapter. You'll find the answers to these questions when you read the chapter thoroughly. Questions are: who were the Orientalists? Define linguist. What was the so-called cultural mission of the British? Who was Munshi? So all these answers you'll find in the chapter if you read thoroughly. Thank you, children.